Hey, we're back again. Um, my original thought was to do a Thunderbird Thursday, and it still might come to that, but right now um, I'm still feeling it out and seeing how I want this to work. This is more of a test video again than anything, because as you can see right now, I'm in a coffee shop recording as opposed to writing. Um, Interestingly enough, what has happened is I went to see two friends of mine do a public spoken word performance at a local art museum, and it turned out that it was sort of a reunion of what we called initially the Gang of Poets, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And one of the things that happened is after those two gentlemen were through with their presentations, the floor was opened for open mic, and there wasn't really a whole lot of initial feedback regarding the open mic. Nobody seemed to be wanting to chomp at the bit, as it were. So I asked the marketing director of the art museum if she wanted me to kick off said open mic since I was in the audience anyway. And she said she did. So um, that's what happened. And as a result, what came about was I told a story about how my whole process started in terms of dealing with doing open mic poetry readings and things like that. And then doing standalone shows as they came about, which has only happened a few times. Um, Unless you count the Thunderbird sessions, which I'll get into in another video most likely. But what's interesting is I told a story about high school. And the story goes like this. When I was in high school, from freshman year through senior year, really, I would invariably fail any math class I was in. I'm just not good at it. I'm not wired for it. My brain isn't as detail oriented as is necessary to be good at any sort of mathematics. Um, Personally, I think it has more to do with cerebral palsy slash any kind of ADD, ADHD that I might be carrying around and may not realize that I have. I've not been tested or anything like that. Um, Aside from visiting with a psychologist now and again when I was in my mid-20s. So, what I had told these gentlemen, or this audience I should say, is that in order to join their ranks, as it were, I failed math classes and had to go to summer school. Well, I went to a local Catholic school here in town, and of course, if you have to go to summer school, it's not going to be a Catholic summer school, it's going to be a public summer school. And it's going to be held at one of the local public schools. And so that's where I went. I got on a big yellow school bus, as you do, and went to summer school. And I took my mathematics class, and I slogged and suffered and tortured myself through that. And then what happened also is I would fail English classes, and I would fail English classes more or less on purpose. Not turning in assignments, refusing to do work, things like that. I read all the assignments. I just didn't write the papers that needed to be written, or I didn't do didn't do them very well. Ultimately, the goal was not to pass the class, to be quite honest, and ultimately, also the goal was to end up in summer school. Why? Well, the longer that I was in summer school, the more time I got to spend in a public school, which is where I felt like I needed to be anyway, as far as educational efforts and so on were concerned. Now, what I also noted was that I met what I'll refer to as regular people. The people in my high school were very cliquish and standoffish for the most part, and I didn't understand them, and they didn't understand me, and frankly, I wasn't socialized very well in grade school. I fought a lot and defended myself in various ways um, physically, psychologically, emotionally, and was just sort of, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is retarded. I don't mean that in any kind of disparaging way, but slowed down socially and emotionally and developmentally in terms of what I was able to process, what I was able to deal with, and how I navigated the world as this person with a disability um, who walked with forearm crutches, and nobody seemed to get it. And in the early 80s, mid 80s, whatever it was, inclusion and acceptance and so forth weren't primary on anybody's list. I didn't understand that, and I didn't, I just thought, okay, well, I'll just be the odd man out, and I'll do what I'm doing and see how that goes. What it turned into was years and years of misery. To be quite honest, I had a great time in the summers because I had great neighbors and people that seemed to understand and seemed to want to hang out, and we did okay. But during the school year, it was just terrible. And so, going to the summer classes, I was able to sort of relegate myself to the other ne'er-do-wells or misfits or whatever words you want to use of the local school district at the time. And what I realized is they didn't give much of a shit as to whether or not I had any kind of disability or not. They were conversational, they were communicative, they were interested and engaging and all sorts of things. And subsequently, what happened is I learned I really, really enjoyed the humanity. I really enjoyed the people that seemed to fall through the cracks, seemed to be missed somehow, relegated to over there, whatever that means. I was one of those people. And subsequently, I discovered various, like I said, initially alternative press writers that wrote about being one of those other people, one of those other types. Guys like Charles Bukowski, who was a drunkard and a misfit and a misanthrope and all sorts of that stuff. But he wrote about humans and being human with such ferocity as well as genuine heart that I felt obligated to do the same. And even though I had failed English class, even though I had not done what I needed to do in terms of being a successful student in that regard, I developed a passion for reading and for writing and all of that, and just turned this into a pursuit that matched some of the writers that I was fans of, some of the performers I was fans of, and I did my best to exceed my own expectations in that regard. And subsequently, I took a lot of heat for that as a young person, but ultimately, when I hit graduation age, I had found a group of people that were doing the same stuff. And the interesting thing about that is they were all misfits and ne'er-do-wells and so forth and so on, but they didn't have any patience for any of my swagger or the chip on my shoulder or anything like that. So I had to knock that shit off and be as genuine as I knew how to be at the time. And frankly, over the rest of our time together, which is ongoing to this day, they've been extremely educational and beneficial to me and so forth. And it wouldn't have been possible, it wouldn't have been plausible if I hadn't have failed English class on purpose for 4 years straight. Got to spend extra time in summer school and kind of TA for other teachers. One of those teachers everybody seems to know locally was a social studies teacher at one of the larger high schools here. Because these things are open to the public, I'm trying to keep them relatively vague. But it was Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly thought I was interesting because I was a fan of Jim Morrison, because I was a fan of of Charles Bukowski at that age, because I was a fan of Henry Rollins, who was um, undeniably mine at that time. I needed him more than I needed him like I needed air, because he was such a powerfully pissed off human being, and I was like, hey, I relate to that. And essentially what he had done was say, look at what I'm writing, look at what I'm saying, look at how I'm presenting myself, and also at the time look at all the other authors that I'm publishing. And it's not Robert Frost, it's not Emily Dickinson, it's not W.S. Merwin, it's not flowers and puppy dogs and candy and so forth. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those writers. I love those guys. But I needed something that I could really kind of chew on and really kind of sink my teeth into and really kind of say, oh, it's okay to write like this. And subsequently I got Rollins and Henry Miller and Hubert Selby Jr. and guys like William Burroughs, guys like these that were as real as anything I'd ever seen and as real as anything I'd ever read. And they created an okayness in me to present myself in those ways as well. And so that's what I did, and that's what I've been doing. It helps. It's the more raw, the more real, the more honest it is, the better it is, and the more valuable it is. I needed those summers in that hot, unair-conditioned public school in order to be able to become this person that I am right now. It took a while to get there. It took years to get there, and I'm still getting, as it were. But it's undeniable how important this stuff is to me. And part of it started with an English teacher whose class I failed intentionally. Her name was Miss Hurst. She encouraged us to journal, and she said the rules were 250 words a day, 7 days a week, for this 2-week period, whatever it was, whatever the assignment was. And I said, okay, I'll knock this one out. I'll do this. And subsequently, it started a habit that continues. When we did poetry stuff, I would write impassioned love letters to girls that I thought were beautiful as a 15, 16-year-old kid. And they never seemed to know how to respond. And I also wrote down lyrics to songs that I loved. One of the bands that I loved in high school and still love to this day is Metallica. I wrote down as though they were a poem of the lyrics to Fade to Black. And one of my teachers saw that in one of the notebooks that I was carrying around and got super upset, thinking that I was suicidal, and that wasn't the case, hasn't been the case, and so on and so forth. So I'm not, not saying that feeling that way is invalid or shouldn't be dealt with, but that wasn't the case for me. I wanted to find some sort of power, and I found it in a fucking composition book, and I hope everybody does, because it's part of who I am and who I continue to be and who I continue to become. So, like I said, this is a test run. We'll see how this goes. I'm deleting a bunch of files off of a flash drive, and I'm going to store these videos on that flash drive so that I can upload them easily and whenever I want to this YouTube channel, and we'll see how it goes. Again, thanks for hanging out with me. Test run number 2. I'm at 14 minutes, so that's pretty interesting. See if you guys are patient enough to listen to all of it. Thanks. See ya. Cheers.